Hello and welcome to another HRO Today educational podcast. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We publish HRO Today magazine, HRO Today EMEA, and HRO Today APAC. We're the producers of the HRO Today forum events held around the world and the managers of the HRO Today Association. Today we're going to talk about culture, employment brand, and perception in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we enter Q4 of 2020, we have seen HR really having to adapt on the fly to many changes in the workforce, the patterns of work, and how employees are experiencing their relationship with their employers. We're thrilled today to welcome to the podcast Theresa Harkins-Schulz, who's the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience for Inspirus. Inspirus is the reward and recognition service provider. It is a division of Sodexo, which is one of the largest multinational conglomerates in the world, providing a variety of services from logistical to employee-based to you name it. And Inspirus is one of our most highly rated companies for rewards and recognition on the HRO Today Baker's Dozen. Theresa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Elliot. It's great to be here.
So, Theresa, because you and I have done this before, I'm going to start off with a quick note. I went to the doctor recently, and they said, it's been about 4 years, and, you're of a certain age, which is now unpublished. And they said, you're probably due for a stress test. And I said to the doctor, you don't think 2020 has been enough of one? Which, had everyone in the room laughing. But it has been a stress test. It's really impacted the business community and particularly HR's need to sort of rise to the moment. And, one of the things I think that's important, and I know in your role at helping develop programs, advise clients, work with them on customer experience, work with them on employee experience, and inspire us with what you do personally, we know that how companies behave in the midst of crisis is probably almost more important to employee perceptions of leadership, employment brand, and overall customer experience than how they behave when things are going well. So what should companies do in the midst of this current environment? I mean, it was worse earlier in the year. We're seeing some improvement. We're still not out of the woods. What should companies do in this current environment to ensure that they'll give employees as positive an employee experience as possible, and also ensure that the company culture that they want to foster and create is moving in the right direction?
Yeah, that's a great question, Elliot. It has been an unprecedented year, and especially for human resource professionals, what they have been asked to do from taking on new duties as being looking over health and safety activities, in some cases in small companies being contact tracers, but ultimately still continuing to try to be a steward of the culture within their organizations. It's definitely been a trying time, and my hat's off to the HR leaders out there who are continuing the fight and continuing to drive great experiences for their employees. When I sit back and look at leadership teams and crisis and things that have happened and where companies have had moments to shine, they really need to and have focused on a couple of key principles. One is that leadership team has to stay in sync. They need to stay in lockstep with the messages that they're providing out to the organization, because that ultimately provides clarity. And when there is question, it's okay to say there's question, or we're uncertain, or we're still looking into something. But in the absence of sharing messages, the workforce will always create their own messages. So making sure that leadership is connected and has a voice that is regular and often during crisis is absolutely imperative. In addition to that, having a swift decision-making process, helping to define the priorities. During times of crisis, we each have to kind of look at, what are those essentials? You go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you're really looking at what do I need to do to ensure my safety in the mix, and make sure that people are focusing on the things that matter to your business at that point in time. Another big component, which really starts to get into where recognition can come into play, is creating direct connection. Many people out there, the younger generation, won't relate to this, but Elliot, I think you and I in those unpublished ages to relate to the time when we would have those antennas that would go to our TV, and we would have to either extend them or move them around the room to get the TV stations to come in. This is a time when leadership need to use their antennas and seek input and information from the front line of their workforce. Get information from people that are doing the work. Be willing to step up, be creative about solutions, and get people involved and empower them in order to make decisions, to help some of the new problems that maybe the crisis has brought to you. And then I think most importantly, as far as trying to drive that experience, is looking for those opportunities to recognize the employees' efforts. Mr. Rogers would always say, look for the helpers. You'll always find people out there who are helping. And those are the people that you do want to focus on during crisis.
I think that's a great point from the macro view of what the leaders need to do. So let's try to get a little more into the tactical side for just a moment. And for those of you in our audience who may not be old enough to remember what we used to call bunny ear antennas that you'd have on TVs. There you go. Remember that term? And you brought up Mr.
Yes.
Rogers. So, Theresa, we're losing demographic all over the place. So for that crowd that doesn't know the term bunny ear antennas, sometimes the most effective way to get the reception wasn't to move the antenna around, it was to bang on the top of the TV, okay, which all of our fathers did at one time or another. So let's talk about how to bang on the top of the TV for just a moment. So how can companies use the tools like recognition and rewards, which is Inspirus is one of the best in the world at? How can you use that from the leadership communication topics we just discussed to reinforce values, create the two-way communication, right? Not only that, hey, you're doing a good job, but find out back from the employees how they're feeling and help drive the perception and reality of culture that will translate into a better future. How can they use those?
Yeah, I think many of the recognition programs and operations that are happening within businesses today provide an opportunity for social interactions, right? So when I recognize someone I publicize that, whether it's on my internet, whether it's part of my recognition platform, or I post that message on a bulletin board, allowing for others to then comment or interact and become a part of that action, all then promote the ability to reinforce that behavior and help spread it throughout the organization. A lot of this is really about defining the criteria of what is important to the organization and then using recognition to constantly reinforce it, put it in front of them. A lot of times you'll hear companies that look for ways to be innovative, and we saw many companies during this pandemic who have adjusted their operations to produce safety equipment, and those employees that helped convert those assembly lines into doing that, were applauded and recognized for it. But ultimately, they're recognizing for innovation. They're recognizing their employees for the way that they are thinking and doing their jobs. And they can carry that innovation on forward past the pandemic into new product lines, new services, and ways that they can bring that to light. And that social element of recognition and the activities, whether it's talking at a team meeting or publishing on a bulletin board or calling the troops together via a Zoom call, all of those methods provide the visibility that's associated with recognition that make it go viral.
Do you find in dealing with and I know you guys have hundreds and hundreds of clients, do you think companies are doing a good job of listening for those messages from the employees right now, or are they just overwhelmed with current circumstance?
I think there are some companies that are excelling at listening to their employees. I've seen a number of efforts from the HR teams that are sending out quick pulse surveys or using their social recognition tools to seek feedback on topics, maybe seek even just interactions with their organizations. More and more, I think there are companies that are doing that. In the beginning, everybody was overwhelmed, but once businesses start to get to a regular cadence, I have seen that manager interactions with employees, we are hearing more and more how intricate the manager relationship is and how important it is for them to be making direct connections. We've seen an uptick within our customer base of looking to provide to those managers more tools, more information, more creative ways to recognize their employees in this virtual environment. So overall, I would give companies a B at this point in time. I mean, I think we might have been a little bit slow to respond, but they are trying to listen. They are asking questions, seeking feedback, and helping the employees, through this crisis by responding to what they may need at that moment in time.
Well, that's great. And yeah, the employees are processing in real time, and their attitudes are probably changing somewhat just as the employers are. For everyone who dialed in, you got to learn a little bit about old-time TV technology, got a Mr. Rogers quote, but more than that, you got a good perception of what companies can do. And I want to thank Theresa Harkins-Schulz, who's the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience for Inspirus. Inspirus, of course, as I said earlier, is one of our most highly rated companies on the HRO Today Baker's Dozen Customer Satisfaction Survey for providing rewards and recognition programs. And Theresa is really responsible for consulting with clients on how their programs are designed and how effectively they're taking advantage of the opportunities offered by rewards and recognition. So, Theresa, big takeaways are companies are doing a good job listening, but they can take even more feedback from the system. And the rewards and recognition tools really can help them drive culture and change employee perceptions, which will impact both their consumer brand and their employment brand in the future. So I want to thank you for taking part, and we'll look forward to doing it again at some point, Theresa. I want to thank our audience for listening in to today's podcast, and we'll look forward to having you join us on a future HRO Today educational podcast.